Go ahead.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Rose Joshua, and I am the president of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP Chicago Southside Branch. Welcome to Conversations with the Candidates, a candidates forum sponsored by the NAACP Southside Branch and Lambda Mu Omega and Chi Omega chapters of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. Thank you, Green Grove Missionary Baptist Church and Pastor Terrell Carter for hosting this forum. As the nation's oldest civil rights organization, the NAACP is committed to educating our community to ensure that Black voters are engaged in the political process and vote in every election. To that end, the Southside branch of the NAACP invited candidates in the June 28th election to a conversation to discuss their qualifications for the office in which they are running. The topic of the conversations will focus on the NAACP game changers, which is health, civil rights, education, economic development, environmental climate justice, and voting rights. These are the issues that have the most disparate impact on Black communities. So it is important where candidates stand on these issues. I will now turn the program over to our moderator for this event, Louis Raymond, to introduce the interviewer and candidate.
Hey, nobody's clapping.
Thank you so much, President Joshua. Good morning, everyone, here at Green Missionary Baptist Church. My name is Louis Raymond. I am a member of the Political Action Committee of the NAACP Southside Branch. Our third conversation today is with Cook County Assessor candidate Kari Steele. Ms. Steele is currently serving her second 6-year term at the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago. She currently serves as the president of the district. Interviewing Ms. Steele is Pam Sadin. Ms. Sadin is an attorney and second vice president of the NAACP Southside Branch and chair of the Political Action Committee. Let's welcome them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, President Steele, for joining us today. This is a real honor for you to come and speak to our membership and the public in general about your run for Cook County Assessors.
No problem.
So before we get into that, I'd like to know a little bit more about you, your background, your family, where you grew up. Can you give us a little?
Yes, sure. So first, thank you for having me, and I thank all of you all for coming this afternoon. So my name is Kari Steele. I grew up on the south side of Chicago in the Chatham area. People always ask me all the time, like, what Steele family are you related to? So we'll get that out the way now. My father is a former 6th Ward Alderman and a retired appellate court justice, John Steele. Out of all of his kids, I was probably the least likely he would expect that would go into politics. I swore it off all along, saying I would never be a politician. I watched my dad. We couldn't go to the grocery store to get one item without it being an hour trip talking to constituents about what's going on. But I had to stay involved in my community. I was involved in my community as a child. Like some of the young faces I see here, I was that kid in the back of the room waiting to go out and get along with my day. But as I grew up and matured, I could not sit back and see what was going on in my community and not be the change that I wanted to see. So I went to college. I went to Xavier University in Louisiana as a chemist because I loved science as a kid, just mixing things up. Chemistry degree, minor in biology. Went on to become a chemist. I worked at water reclamation over the summers, and then I got a job at the water department. Later, I got a little bored with water for a minute, and I formulated ethnic hair care products for L'Oreal USA. And then that is when I got bit by the political bug and decided to run for office. So basically we had an issue in our neighborhood, water in the basement, flooding, and I was the only one in the community meetings that really understood what was going on and could explain it. Because at that point, no one was coming out in the community, in my community, to tell us what was going on. I was also at this time chairman of the 6th Ward Young Democrats and trying to encourage my friends to vote, and I was chairman of Cook County Young Democrats. So basically I explained the situation. Someone stepped out and said, you should run for office. I didn't even know that there was a elected board at Water Reclamation at the time. But I stepped up, ran for office. Oh my gosh, fast forward 10 years later after, well, first attempt to run for office, I did not win. I was not successful, but I was very close. And at that point, you know, you're faced with the decision, do you keep the momentum going or do you stop? And I chose to keep it going because I still knew we deserved to see that change that we wanted to see. We deserved to have someone on the board from the south side of Chicago and someone with a chemistry background. So, you know, my qualifications were unique. So I ran and then I was successful. Then fast forward 10 years later, I'm now president of the agency.
All right. That's a very, very inspiring story. I appreciate you telling it, to go from being an actual employee chemist of the district to now being the president of the board. That's awesome. So you're running now for Cook County Assessor. All right, let's talk about that office. It's kind of a under the radar office. We know we need the assessor, but tell us a little bit, what is the purpose of the assessor's office?
So the purpose of the assessor's office is to make sure government is paid the fair share by the taxpayers. That's like the textbook term. So what it really is taxpayers have to pay their fair share to the government for their expenses. It's the levy. We have to contribute to the levy. The levy is the amount of money a governmental agency requests to finalize their budget or to fulfill their budget. The key is making sure taxpayers only pay their fair share so that you're not causing a burden to the taxpayer.
Okay, and what are the duties of an assessor's office?
The duties of the assessor's office is to make sure your assessments are established fairly and accurately and they reflect the market, and to make sure the proper exemptions are applied. And then to make sure that amount is established so that you receive your tax bill on time. So make sure you have fair assessments, proper exemptions applied, so you receive your tax bill on time. Two primary duties of the assessor, two responsibilities that the assessor is responsible for, that the taxpayers have elected him to do.
Okay,
Or
so,
her.
right, and so this is mainly for homeowners, is that correct?
Any property owner. So any property owner, and don't think if you're a renter that this does not affect you too. Now I would also like to add, before we get into, being an assessor, one thing that made me cue into this job a little more, at Water Reclamation, I stepped in there as a chemist, but a couple of board meetings, maybe a month or two in, I'm like, we're voting on a lot of land use issues. So I realized half of the issues we were voting on at Water Reclamation wasn't treatment process, wasn't, how we're gonna raise this chemical or lower this chemical. It was land use issues, because Water Reclamation is one of the largest landowners in Illinois. So during my first term as a commissioner, I became a licensed real estate broker. After I became a licensed real estate broker, I became a certified Illinois assessing officer. So this made me more so tune into the complaints I was hearing across Cook County about, constituents having concerns about their property taxes or the assessed value of their property, or not really understanding how their property tax bill, how that number came about with their property tax bill, or worried about late bills. So that's what made me want to step up and even analyze the responsibilities of the Cook County assessor to know that I could be a competent manager and basically a great representative for us in that office.
So you took it upon yourself not knowing that later you'd run for the assessor's office to learn about tax issues?
Basically, because as you know, at Water Reclamation, I wanted to do the best job I could do there at that time. And when I got there and realized I had this void, you have staff, and staff is great at Water Reclamation. They will advise you and suggest to you, how you should vote and educate you on issues. But if you're a great public servant, I feel like you should just basically try to arm yourself with all the knowledge that you can gather, so that you can, make decisions on your own as well. So yes, I did that, not even thinking about the assessor at that time, but I wanted to make sure I represented my community the best way I could.
So that's part of your work ethic.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, great. So let's get into the meat of the assessor's office. And you mentioned about equity. I know that when looking for a home, it's like, okay, what are the taxes? And so why does that matter to a homeowner when they're looking for a home, or where you live, and how does that affect your status, even your socioeconomic status?
It affects your status completely, because it's another bill basically, and you have to plan your finances around your bills, right? So I've been saying from the beginning, the office, we need more equity, transparency, and more communication at the assessor's office. Now, when you get that tax bill, it's important that the assessment is fair, because if you're paying more than your fair share, then it could affect your ability to save. That's part of the job, making sure it's a fair share. If the tax bill is late, like they currently are going to be and have been in the past, then it still affects your ability to plan your finances. If you're, say, a senior citizen on a fixed income, or anyone on a fixed income, and you receive a late property tax bill, then you receive your next bill, and they're back to back, that makes it very complicated to save and keep your finances on track. And you can easily fall behind on bills, and then it affects your status. Also, don't think it's just homeowners. The assessed value affects renters too. So currently now, large apartment buildings the assessed value has increased about 70% across Cook County. This expense goes on to the renters. Over 40% of Cook County residents rent. So that means it's hard for anyone who rents, but also we know a lot of the younger people, when you get your first apartment, you're usually renting. This affects your ability to save, whether you're saving to get that master's degree, to continue your education, or achieve the American dream of home ownership. So it definitely affects your status, and the assessor has to make sure that assessments are fair, accurate, and equitable, and he's analyzing every community and looking at what they need to thrive.
Great. And piggybacking on that equity question. In the past, the assessor's office was notorious for producing inaccurate property tax assessments that punished poor minority homeowners across the county. Have the tax assessments against minorities improved since then? And if not, what will you do to make sure assessments are equitable?
They have not improved this since then for everyone. I do not feel assessments are equitable right now. To ensure equity, one, I would make sure that assessments are fair and accurate and reflect the market, period. I would make sure that all the proper exemptions are applied. And it might sound like a simple statement, but when you're out in the community and you're talking to residents, you could look at their tax bill and you'll hear them say, I didn't know I should have that exemption. So we need to make sure we're out in the community letting everyone know just even what's available for them to have at that time. Also, one example of inequity would be the COVID factor that was in the newspaper recently, whereas the current assessor reevaluated assessed properties that were assessments that were already established, but reevaluated them according to unemployment predictions during COVID. This resulted in COVID relief at around 2,000 to, say, Winnetka, are more expensive homes, but then in Chatham, it was like $200. That's not equitable. And I feel even whatever calculation it was, because it was mystery math and we've, tried to get that information and we don't know what the formula was, but if you have someone that understands your community at the table, you would see this and say, this is not fair and this is not happening. And so I want to be that voice at the table for all communities, but I understand our community and I understand the job and know that you can't reassess property based on predicted unemployment rates. It's not part of the job. So that's why I keep repeating like fair and accurate assessments that reflect the market, because that's the only way you should reevaluate or assess property.
Okay, thank you. So when you talk about accuracy, if a homeowner believes that their home is overvalued, what is the current appeal process and what would you do to improve the process if necessary?
So the appeals process, right now, you receive your tax bill and you can appeal your assessment with the assessor's office. You have 30 to 45 days. I believe it was 45 and it was reduced to 30. I would put it back up and give the property owner as much time as they need. So I would do that 45 days. But then after that, you can go to the Board of Review, and then after you appeal at the Board of Review, if you're still not happy with the decision, you could go to PTAB, which is the Property Appeals Tax Board. No, Property Tax Appeals Board, PTAB, and you could appeal that way as well. What I would do is definitely make the appeals process friendlier. I would make it so that it's on the website and you can come into the office. I'm big on customer service. Taxpayers deserve good customer service, even at governmental agencies. So I would make the process friendly so that, one, I'm bringing the assessor's office to all communities, just as I did with water reclamation. I feel everyone should know about how to appeal the assessed value of their property, but also not feel uneasy about going downtown to go through the process. When they go downtown, if they want to do it in person, I want them to feel comfortable doing it. I want to have staff available, if not myself, to walk you through that property tax bill, make sure you have the proper exemptions, make sure we're comparing your property to another comparable property that should be used, and make sure we're listening to you. It should be the assessor's office burden to support their assessed value versus the taxpayer's burden.
And that was one of my questions, it can be a convoluted concept.
Yes.
And difficult for the average homeowner, even myself, to understand. And so you did touch upon that question I had about what will you do to make it easier to understand by making it more customer friendly, more accessible, and making sure that when they do come or reach out to your office, they'll be respected, treated with patience
Yes.
and consideration.
Yes, definitely.
That's great. So I want to move on to economic development. So many of our neighborhoods consist of small businesses. How do you make sure that small businesses are not overassessed, which makes it difficult for them to stay open and discourages economic development?
I would make sure small businesses are not overassessed by, one, making sure the assessments are fair and accurate, but also making sure that we recognize that we are going through hard economic times. So right now, what the assessor has done is group the large developers downtown with the small businesses. And when I say small businesses, I'm thinking about our mom and pop shops, the small businesses that we see on like 75th Street, the places we gather after church, whether it's a restaurant, the beauty salon, well, not on Sunday, but you know, the beauty salon, the small businesses, that local taqueria or the J&J Fish. They are seeing tax increases of like assessment increases of about 200% right now during COVID. Now, these are the economic anchors of our community. Basically, they provide local jobs. They provide places for us to go in our neighborhood. When their doors close, the economic anchors of our community, then what happens to our community? Basically, we lose jobs, the tax base decreases, and then statistics show after that crime goes up in the neighborhood. So I definitely will work on classifying small businesses different from the large businesses downtown. But I would also work with them if there were mistakes made so that they don't get sticker shock. Because at the end of the day, we have to work together in our neighborhoods, small businesses and property owners, if we want our neighborhoods to thrive. And the goal is to not drive down, and I'm using 75th Street because that's right by where I grew up, but the goal is to not drive down 75th Street and see all these boarded up buildings or, you know, storefronts and whatnot. We want our neighborhoods to thrive. We need economic development, local jobs, and crime to decrease.
Okay, so that's small businesses. Well, what about, you know, large corporations and business, which we also need and appreciate? What policies will you implement to attract large businesses to the county, which may increase employment opportunities?
Yes, for large businesses, of course, we do need economic development everywhere and jobs. If there are no cranes in the skies, no economic development and no jobs. I would rework or reanalyze the incentive process. Right now, there's an incentive process in place and it's honestly not working. It's not encouraging businesses to develop, and it's discouraging affordable housing construction. So I will work with them to make sure incentives are doing what they should be doing, incentivizing economic development. Right now, incentives are not, or incentives should be understandable, they should be predictable, and they should be effective. Basically, at this point, it takes over a year to even know what your incentive will be if you're a developer. And that makes it so that that developer can't finalize their business plan. And then they really think about, do they want to do business with us? Do they want to do business in Cook County? And some of them will choose to go somewhere else. So I will work with the local officials to make sure the incentive plan is actually incentivizing growth. And we need to be a friendly place to do business and offer predictability, because that's all they need, predictability, so they can complete their business plan, and then we could have economic development and jobs.
Great. I want to turn now to transparency and ethics. In the past, the assessor's office has been riddled with scandal and corruption. What mechanisms will you use to make sure that Cook County homeowners can trust that certain homeowners and businesses aren't getting special treatment?
So one of my top goals is to address ethics concerns. At Water Reclamation, when I became president, we hired our first ever Inspector General in our 130-year history. So I understand the importance of us feeling comfortable with our government and that we're getting the services, the honest government that we deserve. So I would take it a step further at the assessor's office. Right now, there's an executive order in place that prohibits the assessor and his staff, their family members from lobbying the office or asking for an official action. Definitely would stick to that, but I would take it a step further and hire a full-time chief ethics officer, where it's their only responsibility to make sure everyone is being held accountable. And they will be required to submit reports, and I will make the reports available to the public. So I feel the ethics, it needs to be taken a step further. The current assessor, I don't feel, has gone far enough. And I would do that just to, without a doubt, make sure taxpayers feel comfortable that it's not any backroom deals or anything going on at the assessor's office.
Okay, great. Any questions for the president? Yes, sir.
Give me a second here, sorry about that.
Hello, how are you?
Not bad. Question I have is, we're dealing with a property tax system itself that hasn't been, for lack of a better word, the rate hasn't been changed since about the 90s, and you could think commissioners like John Daly for that. So if elected, would you lobby the commissions board to change at minimum the rate of the structure? How? Because you're still working with something from the early 90s.
I would work with the Cook County Board and with my constituents to be their voice at the table to address any changes with the property tax system. So I'm elected to represent my community and the constituents of Cook County. So that I will work with them, and I feel if we're going to change anything with the property tax system, we need someone in office who is a consensus builder and a communicator. So it's very important to have someone who has that experience of working with elected officials to get the job done. As president at Water Reclamation, I have to work with different municipalities and elected officials all the time to make sure our projects are complete and established and complete on time. So I would make sure I work with the other elected officials, make sure I'm a voice at the table for my constituents to make sure I'm making decisions that they want.
Appreciate it, man.
Thank you.
Yes.
Question, from a homeowner that stays in Inglewood, our property tax got reassessed and the property tax for that year was lower, but at the same time, the value of the property was also lower as well. So what's the balance? Nobody wants to pay high property taxes, of course, but at the same time, nobody wants their property, reduce the value lower. So, what's the balance is, because I believe the current, administration is campaigning on, that was, they lowered our, but in a way that really was not a good thing, even though you got lower property taxes, it's a lower bill, and now our value of our property is lower.
So President, how will you navigate,
Yes.
lowering the assessments without lowering the value of homes?
Exactly, and that's why I'll keep saying fair and accurate, because you're right, you said no one likes to pay property taxes, but everyone wants to make sure they're paying their fair share. And they, your property, you wanna make sure it's valued at what it should be valued at. That's part of the equity piece too, making sure like, you're not just coming into a neighborhood slashing prices because you think that's what they want. You need to make sure that it's what they need to thrive, what that neighborhood needs to thrive. So I would make sure that it's fair across the board and make sure someone's property is not being assessed at a different value, but then it's a property up the block being assessed differently and it's the same type of property. So I would just look at everything and I would hear your concerns. I'm known to be that type of public servant that's engaged and has an open door policy. That definitely wouldn't stop at Water Rec. So with you having that situation, I would sit down and talk to you or have staff talk to you. We would analyze your bill, look at comparables in the area, and make sure we have a conversation about why is that amount or why that amount should be adjusted.
When you mentioned, looking at comparables, and this goes to transparency. An assessor's office does the valuations, and if a homeowner thinks that they're not being fairly, the value isn't fairly assessed or the taxes aren't, fairly assessed, a homeowner or their attorney might need information from your office to do that comparable through the Freedom of Information Act. And the current assessor inherited a backlog of FOIA requests to get that information, so that people can get that information, but he hasn't been able to respond to all those requests. What will you do to make sure this backlog is addressed so that people will be able to make a decision whether or not they should even appeal their assessment?
Yeah, that's a loaded one. So
Yeah.
first, I do feel no taxpayer should have to go as far as submitting a FOIA to have questions answered about their property tax bill. I think that's just, should be basic, and that's community service that's being out in the community, making sure community outreach is increased so that we're available to answer any questions you have. You shouldn't have to go as far as to submit a FOIA, the average everyday person, to get a question or to have a question answered or to have something explained. Also, I don't think the average property owner should have to hire a lawyer to have their property tax bill explained to them or to have the assessed value of their property explained to them. Once again, this is something that I want my office, when I'm the next assessor, to be taken care of in-house. Staff should be able to answer these basic questions and explain these basic values to you. And it should seem basic when you leave, because I want to simplify the data so that once you're in, you might feel like it's complicated, but when you leave, you're like, I got it, and maybe you can explain it to your neighbor. That's how much I want to simplify the process. And FOIAs. FOIAs have to be taken seriously. FOIAs, you have to respond to them within 5 days, even if you're asking for an exemption within 5 days. You have to, as a competent manager, not only should you know what FOIAs are coming into your office, maybe you get a monthly update, but you should know that staff is responding to FOIAs. If you don't respond to FOIAs, you are breaking the law. Now, as far as the backlog of FOIAs, in 3 years, you should catch up. If you've been on the job for 3 years, I feel you should have caught up with the FOIAs. Right now, there was a story recently out in Cranes where the current assessor has over 2,800 FOIA requests that have gone unanswered. So these are unanswered requests from property owners who just want answers. That's against the law, honestly. So the current assessor is breaking the law by not responding to FOIA requests. I, as a public servant and as a competent manager, would make sure my staff is responding to FOIA requests. I would have something in place where we can do check-ins, just like a manager would do with their staff, and make sure FOIA requests are being answered to, because the taxpayers deserve it, and it's an injustice for someone to have to go to that extreme to submit a FOIA request. And a FOIA request for the younger people, because I just realized I keep saying FOIA request, is a Freedom of Information Act request. So it's when it's your right to ask for this information. So you're going to the extreme. So a Freedom of Information Act request is submitted, and when that's submitted, someone has 5 days to answer it. You should answer it. Right now, FOIAs are not being taken seriously at the assessor's office. They are going weeks, months without answering Freedom of Information Act requests.
I just have one question.
Yes.
Because Kennedy Steele, thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you for doing
I'm
this.
making the conclusion as it relates to the assessor's office and the building of wealth in our community. It goes right there. And you said something that said, and I've heard this before, but they didn't use the same words. You said it's a mystery on how property is assessed. If you don't do anything else as assessor, it shouldn't be a mystery.
You're right.
If you're talking about accurate, you're talking about equity, and equity is about let me repair what we've done in the past.
Yes.
What you gonna do about the past?
Yes.
And then let's get on board with the equity and what it really means.
You're right.
How are you gonna do that? But I think my question is, you got my question, right?
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and that's part of it, and I think part of the whole equity is simplifying the data, making sure that everyone can understand it and making sure it's fair, but also being accessible, being the public servant that you have elected me to be, and hearing your concerns, being out in the community, understanding what's going on so I could be your voice at the table. So I know it's a lot that I can remember hearing people complain about the property tax system when I was younger, and as I got older and I thought we were about to see the reform reform and the transparency and the change that we wanted, you know, I was excited and thought we were gonna be on the right track. Once I started seeing what was still happening and still going on, and honestly, some of the inequities to me have gotten worse for my community, I could not sit back and just not do anything, knowing about the qualifications that I have to fix the problem, especially having the heart of a public servant and being from the family I'm from. So I had to step up and say, you know what, we're gonna get it right this time. And we can't go through another 4 years like this. There are a lot of people who say, he just got there, you know. He needs time to adjust. Every job I've been on, we have a probation period. It's longer, I mean, honestly though. And so how long do you let someone, you know, how long do you let someone try? If they're already doing things that you don't think are fair. If they're already not able to work with people. How are we gonna fix, after we get the taxes fair, then we have to fix the whole property tax system. So how are we gonna fix the property tax system if you don't get along with your coworkers?
So that's what you mean by you don't just talk about it, you don't be about it.
I definitely will, thank you.
Thank you so much, President Steele. This was so informative.
Thank
And
you,
you're
thank
an
you.
excellent teacher.
Thank you.
And I, you know, I appreciate, you know, you coming and breaking it down like you did.
No problem, and thank you all for having me. Thank you for the great questions. I am available to answer any additional questions you all have. If you have a piece of my literature, there's a QR code on it, and it will take you straight to my email, my website. For the younger people, the social media. Please let me know if you have any additional questions, and also, you should stay connected about just different opportunities in the community and resources that are available at the assessor's office. Because I'm pretty sure that, you know, the average person doesn't know about that either. Just like at water reclamation, like job opportunities, I was big on making sure people knew just how to even apply for a job there. So there are many ways that we need to bridge the gap and connect with the office, and I'm hoping we could do this with your support. I'm hoping I'll be your next Cook County assessor. My punch number is 112.
Thank you. Thank you, President. Thank you, President Steele, and thank you, Ms. Sade. We hope the audience found this conversation to be useful in deciding which candidate to vote for in the Cook County Assessor's race. Once again, membership is the lifeblood of the NAACP. If you would like to join the NAACP's Southside branch, please visit our website at naacpcss.org. You may join for as little as $35 per year. We also invite you to our monthly general meetings held every third Saturday of the month via Zoom. You may also find the Zoom information on our website. We are not done for the day. Join us back here at 2 o'clock today, where we will have a conversation with Commissioner Dennis Deere, as well as Cook County Commissioner candidate Jalen McClinton, Andre Smith, and Monica Boyd. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all.